Here we go. It is Wednesday. This is Why Libertarian. If you are returning or if you are brand new, this is the show where basically we just talk shit about liberty. So I'm Matt. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, share, notification bell, retweet, get this out there. I will also throw my Linktree scroll on the bottom. Remember, I am on the blockchain as much as possible. So if you are not there, definitely get there. And if you don't know how to get there, check out the video that I did on YouTube. That was basically a one hour walkthrough of how to get onto the Hive blockchain and all the wonderful social media stuff that they got going on there. So that being said, really quick intro today because we have an awesome freaking guest today. His reputation precedes him. Tower Gang for life, bro. A member of the Tower Gang, host of the No Way Jose podcast and vlog, Jose Galison. What's going on, Jose?
Not a whole lot, just chilling. What's up?
You're chilling in the AC less air going on there.
Yep. Here in Florida, my AC broke yesterday, and the AC guy isn't going to be out here till Friday, so whatever.
Yeah. Well, you know, some people pay to go to the sauna. You just have to wake up. So. All right. So anyone who is not familiar with you, who are you?
I am Jose Galison. I have the No Way Jose podcast, like you said. That's basically the gist. I mean, I do some stuff on Tower Gang every now and then. On I was one of the. I mean, I know we call it. We had like Alpha Squad, which is the first group of Tower Gangers that were people actually Tower Ganging. And then like I was, I don't know, like we said like beta or like backup or whatever. And like I was like one of those. And we're the ones who start up a podcast, and we kind of have like a rotating thing. So there's a podcast there too that I'm on sometimes. But I don't know. I'm mostly just like, I just have my own podcast. I usually do about 2 episodes a week. I'm usually lazy and reuse stuff like this and use as my episode, pull a Tom Woods, and just reuse, shit. But,
work smarter, not harder is always a great mantra.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, like, it's like whatever. You get other people's stuff out to different audiences and stuff, cross-promote type deal. So
what got you into the content game? Like, were you always someone who liked to kind of like, put on a show, or did something else kind of push you in that direction?
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a long, convoluted story. It's funny. The guy in the bottom who said hashtag Tower Gang, that was Rogue. He was actually the one who kind of, in a sense, got me started. There you go. There he is again. Yep. He kind of sort of pulled me along this route because he initially started a group called the Liberty Movement on Facebook, and it was like kind of picked up steam during around the beginning of COVID and stuff. And it was kind of like the whole concept of that was it was supposed to be like a cultural, non-political space for liberty, and it was like the idea was like to unite kind of deal, and like our theory there was that we could unite around culture as opposed to the politics. So, it kind of spurred out from there. And like, so I started the Liberty Movement YouTube channel, which was going to be like a kind of like a rotating cast of shows. And then from there, I like to kind of support that, I started my own show. But yeah, it's a whole long convoluted thing, but basically that's, yeah, it kind of, COVID kind of dragged me into it. I'd been kind of sort of want to do for a while. I mean, I don't know. I like to talk. I don't know.
Yeah. I love you talk about like culture, because I think there's a lot of people that like get wrapped up in the whole liberty thing because whatever, they get drawn into politics. They're like, they get a little black pilled or whatever. They're like, this is all bullshit, right? Like, they're like, let's see what the libertarians are doing and some of these crazy anarchists that are part of the libertarian movement. And they're like, all right, that sounds good, awesome. And then they start shit posting on Twitter, and they're like, okay, well then that's the end of it, right? Like, I'm gonna save the world by shit posting on Twitter. But really, it's the culture thing, right? Like, you can't just run a campaign and then, like magic, all of a sudden, like, you know, politics fixes it all. If anything, being libertarian is the exact opposite of that. It's like living as if politics doesn't exist, and then the politics will take care of itself. But I love that you talk about culture. So like, you've kind of like created a little community. Do you have one? So like, you definitely have one virtually, right? Tower Gang and kind of the crew that listens and watches you. But do you have one like where you immediately are, like in real life as well?
Sort of. Like I said, the Liberty Movement thing, it kind of took on multiple forms, and we kind of created chapters. It's kind of dialed back a little bit since we don't have the energy of the Couve as much now. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a thing, but it's not like it was, you know. But so it's died down a little bit, but a few places had some like fairly active chapters, and I'm in Florida, and we had a fairly decent chapter. We've done one meetup. We kind of have another meetup kind of in the you know, still in the ether, you know, that we're working on to eventually hopefully pull off. We were talking about, and I already got it confirmed he'd be down for it with Sal Mayweather. We were going to do like a 3D printing slash like, like crypto workshop type thing, you know,
I love that.
Hangout. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, we have that. So it's like, I got to meet a lot of people locally. So that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely kind of gotten to know people around me more. It's pulled me more into the culture. I just did an episode last night with the Daggerist from like Agorist Nexus, and we met at the Soho Forum event too. So there were kind of that going on. I don't know. It once you kind of start moving that way, you start meeting people and stuff. And I don't know. I've been saying for the past like year, do something. I mean. There definitely is some credence to like the online shit. Like that is part of our culture in a sense, and like shitting on blue checks is kind of, you know, helps loosen the myth of authority, you know, like if I'm like making fun of Biden, it's like people who buy into that, like, you know, the illusion of authority kind of pulls them a little bit away from that when they're like, haha, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's also a form of therapy, right? Like all those, like, you know, it's either that or throw something at the TV is basically what it comes down to, you know? No, I completely agree with that. Like the whole, like just do something aspect of it, I think it's really important right now. Because like there's tons of people that are pissed because of COVID. The question is whether or not they actually move to action and do something about it. And I'm not talking about political campaigns or any of that shit. I'm talking more about like the cultural side, like you're talking about, you know, like 3D printing workshops and like advocating for actual liberty and stuff like that. But so let me ask you really quickly, if anyone goes to watch any of your other videos, they're going to hear this, and I will tell you, go to No Way Jose on YouTube, or I think you're also on most of the podcasting platforms as well, right? Listen to No Way Jose. You'll hear this in detail, but you come at this from a military service member perspective. How did you get to liberty coming from, you know, the armed services, basically?
I mean, when I joined it wasn't something I thought deeply about. I was kind of just like a Fox News conservative. I don't know. I don't remember who I talked about this recently, but we were talking about like the biggest thing that kind of got me into it was having a commute, because I had about an hour drive for the longest time to work every day. And so I mean, for the longest time I listened to music, but after a while I started listening to like podcasts and stuff, and being like the Fox News conservative type, I kind of started like with like Ben Shapiro, and then from there, like I went to like the David Rubin. And then, you know, like, I think I could probably come up with more. Like, I think Crowder definitely was in the mix. And then like kind of like you can kind of see the progression from there. Then I think I started listening to Rogan at one point, and then Rogan is a great jumping off point to like listen to other people and stuff. And I think that's where I found Dave, if I'm correct. So I found Dave Smith, and Dave Smith is probably the big one. So I like listened to him for like probably 2 or 3 years before he like, I mean, like at that point I was already like what I would consider like I don't know, probably like a full blown minarchist, you know. Yeah. Whatever. I mean, I know a lot of anarchists get hurt about that, and like that can mean a million things. Like Stalin was a minarchist technically, but you all know what I mean when I say that. I'm an anarchist now, but like it took a while before Dave finally kind of like pushed me over, because I rode that fence for a while, and he kind of was always talking about Anatomy of State, and I read Anatomy of State, and that's what pushed me over. Because the big thing for me was like I recognized that like the government as an institution, or just, you know, coercion in general is evil, but I was of the belief that it was necessary. So it was just dispelling that myth of necessary. And then,
no, that's, I think that's it's not everyone has the same path, but that is a very typical story. Like you would hear a lot of people say, like they came from either the left or the right. They got like their foundation kind of like taken out from under them, right? And so that's what brought them to kind of like more the libertarian world. And so even in coming to the libertarian world, they didn't even get red pilled. Like they had to come here before they got red pilled. And then there's like this progression where it's like red pill, black pill, and then anarchist, whether it's black pilled anarchist or white pilled anarchist, that just like ends up being the general, you know, water slide that you go down. What are your thoughts on Dave Smith potentially running for the presidency?
you're gonna do this to me, huh? Yeah, no, it's funny. Anyone who knows me knows I'm an agorist. So like, I mean, not that I'm necessarily like, when I say that, I don't mean that I'm like, oh, these are my box of like, this is what I believe, and I'm like not. That's just like if I'm going to describe the beliefs that I've come to, that's probably the best thing. I have minor differences probably here and there, but for the most part, I don't actually agree that politics is the way to go. I think personally, my thing is like I don't take the perspective that I know a lot of people take like voting is immoral or shit like that. I'm not that kind of person. I more just think I think it through, and I just feel like tactically long term I don't think it works out. Personally, I could be wrong. I mean, this is a tactical discussion. I think it takes us the wrong way. Personally, I would rather convince people not to vote, or just be an individualist and do my own shit, and then hopefully maybe people will take an example of that, you know. But so I think at best, my personal opinion is at best, like political involvement is a neutral. Like you're probably like you're just wasting your time, and at worst I think it's moving us backwards. But I generally don't usually try to cause problems, because I know this is where a lot of like, and I know there's a bad like taste in people's mouth of like anarchists who are like against like political involvement. People always think we're like assholes, but I generally try to avoid it, because even then, like I feel like mathematically it kind of doesn't fucking matter. So like, who cares? So like, and I don't really feel like, and I also do think there is, I can see the utility if you're operating on like, say you really genuinely think we have a short timetable. I can see how political involvement in that perspective, like you could like on a short time scale, how it could be useful. Like if you're like, hey, you know, we're going to hell in a handbasket and this is all we got. Like we got to do something. Sure. And I kind of do think we're going to hell in a handbasket, but at the same time, I feel like the argument for political involvement is always we're going to hell in a handbasket. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of hard to tell. You know?
The world's going to end. Listen to me. I know what's best, right?
Even before COVID, it was like that was the argument. Like we're going to shit, and like, and while I am like, yeah, probably. Like I don't know. Like it's also like I could be wrong, and I guess I don't know. I would more push people just not get involved at all. And I mean, I have a theory about how the future is going, and I think we're going to like, I don't know, 50 plus years. I think it's going to be more like how to put it. Like have you heard any of the Agenda 2030 type stuff?
Some of it, yeah. Like I know that we're on Agenda 2020. And now it's been pushed to Agenda 2030 to some extent now.
Yeah, well, I'm not like huge into the like that specific part of it, but I do think that is probably the kind of way we're moving. And I know a big part of that is that like we're gonna have like these like smart cities in the future, and it's gonna be like these hubs of like, you know, and it's like for them it sounds like a utopia, but for us we're like, holy shit, that's like a dystopia. Like that sounds awful. But I think history rhymes, and this when I first heard about this, it really reminded me a lot of honestly kind of a few things, a handful of things I've been reading. But one of the big things from history remind me of I don't know if you ever read James C. Scott Against the Grain and how he went into how the first states were formed and how they were formed around agriculture. And a big theme of that book was how like the first states were formed around the advent of agriculture, and the state kind of founded itself around the fertile areas. And what ended up happening is like the state stamped its area in that like the fertile agriculture areas, and then people who would be, I mean, obviously not necessarily anarchists, but something more along those lines, whether they be tribal communities, what have you, the savages of the time, they kind of set up around the outskirts in the less fertile areas, which for anyone would think they would probably do worse because like that's not like where things grow well and stuff, but they hunted, what's the word where you like pick whatever
scavenged,
gathered. Yeah, I'm gonna think of the word later, but it's like when you just grab plants from outside and eat that shit. But but like they were doing that kind of stuff, and if you look at the fossil records and stuff, it looks like they actually were doing better. But history doesn't tell their tale, and I think that's it's in a weird way history rhymes, and like it would seem like, hey, this like state area is gonna do really well. That's like where they have like whether it be the agriculture or whether it be the smart city, like, oh, that sounds nice and flashy, but it's like, but really, like, is it going to be the savages or is it going to be the, for modern day terms, like the hicks and out in the rural areas, I think if you're that hick in that rural area, I think you might do better. And I think that's kind of where it's going. It also reminds me a lot of like Konkin's, how he thinks Agricultural Revolution kind of goes down and how the state is almost like it recedes into like bubbles as it dies. So, but where they stamp down their power, almost like little North Koreas, if you will, So, and I kind of see that going forward, and I would rather just convince people to, start moving that way, whether it's, move to the country, move to a red state, or whether it's, start becoming less dependent on the state, which that kind of ties into the military thing. That's actually, a lot of people like to like bring up like, oh, you're like, because I brought up that I'm trying to get out of the military, and they'd be like, everyone I feel like is immediately assuming like, oh, it's because you're an ANCAP. No, I'm no hero. I'm not gonna lie. I've been an ANCAP for years now. Yeah. I was just kind of biting my gritting my teeth and pushing through. I mean, I'm a mechanic, so it's like, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's immoral. I think what I do is immoral. Yeah. But I'm a little sterner asking that it fucking pays the bills. But but at the end of the day, now seeing the way things are now, I think that if you are dependent on the state, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And I think that kind of plays into the way things are going. Like you look at the stimmies and stuff, like what is that? That is the state trying to make people dependent on them. So, and I think that, it's a whole bunch of things at once, but yeah.
To that end, so like just to kind of cycle back to Dave Smith or whoever ends up running, I would say to your point, I agree. Like if a political party like the Libertarian Party thinks they're going to affect change by electing someone who's higher up the food chain, they're wrong. It's not going to happen because even Dave has talked about this in prior podcasts, and you've probably heard this. He was like, look, if it ever got to the point where we were legitimately contending to win one of these races, like someone would get killed. Like that's what would happen. They have too much control and too much power
driving Dallas
into this, right? Yeah, exactly, right? And so the answer is, I think that the way that it becomes a positive isn't if it's thought of as a political campaign. If it's more of thought about just as a global microphone, right, that gets given to the person, and then they can like try and shift at least part of the people's thinking, get that Overton window a little bit closer back to what reality should be as opposed to, some of this other stuff. But to your point, I don't think that means that you necessarily have to stay invested in the system to do it, right? Like, I agree with you. I think that people should be doing as much as they can to starve the beast, right? And, basically try and take their kids out of school, essentially barter, try and, trade and do transactions away from centralized eyes and authority. I think all of that stuff would also, actually help undermine the influence, like you said, and then they might actually retreat into those technologically centralized cities, and then like the rest of us rubes and hicks can just live our own life out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I want to hint that I honestly probably should have attacked that. I'm not attacked, but because I knew that like that is the ultimate thing, and I feel like a lot of people when they go after this argument of like utilizing the politics, they skate around that, because I do feel like that is the hard question. Like, is it useful as a bullhorn for liberty? And I have a few different things that I mean, I hope I'm wrong, because I mean, if I am wrong, Dave Smith and the Mises Caucus are the perfect ones for it. But I kind of don't think I am. Like, so I have probably like three main ones. I mean, I'll probably end up forgetting one or slipping up. But the one of them is, I think what we're doing is, I mean, or not we, but like people doing this are building up a platform for the fucking blue-pilled pussies to take over later. And I think this is how this works. This energy, you have these periods where you have this like pure like we're gonna do shit like stuff like this, because like I don't get me wrong, it's hard for me to not get caught up in it and be like, fuck yeah, like yeah. But I think it's like this is where it drives, like, you know, the movement, you know, to keep, you know, to build up that platform. And I think what inevitably is going to happen, because I don't even think it's really in our nature to consistently do shit like this. So I think inevitably that energy is going to die out. Like the people who were initially in it, whether it be like some people like me who were typically non-voting anarchists, I think over time are going to end up like receding back. And it's going to inevitably, because I think like the minarchist, or the, you know, essentially what I make fun of them as being centrist, the blue-pilled libertarians. Like, I think they're just centrists. Like, honestly, I do. Like, I think they stand for nothing. Like, but I think inevitably what we're doing is we're setting up something for them to take over later and to use it in a malicious fashion. I could be wrong, but I just don't, I see that being more in their nature to handle something this bureaucratic shit. And it's not really in ours, like the ones who agree with our message. I also think the message kind of gets lost for a lot of people. So I think for a lot of people, they kind of they lose, the message gets lost in translation. So I don't think a lot of people get that we're like, hey, you know, fuck the state. And what they get is, oh, look how we can affect change through policies or this or that. And because they see this energy and they get all caught up in it, you know, because I mean, I've been there. And the third one, which I actually haven't even thought of until Vin brought it up I don't remember if it was with Mark Clare or if it was with Clint. Both were great episodes. If you haven't watched those ones, don't get me wrong, I have some things I disagree with it, but he kind of brought up, and it made me think of that. I don't necessarily think it's healthy for us to be putting all this energy. And as much as I love Dave, like if I'm going to have any idol, honestly, like, or any hero or whatever, it's probably Dave. So it's kind of hurts me to say this because like he is like if I'm going to put like anyone who has the biggest influence in my political thinking, it was Dave. But at the same time, I don't necessarily know if it's healthy for us to be putting all this energy, all our eggs in one basket, essentially, if you will, because I think that is how you corrupt a movement. And I'm not saying Dave is going to do that necessarily, but Vin kind of brought up a point, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of bullshitting here. But, you know, like, say the feds come and say, hey, here's a few million. Like,
yeah, right.
I mean, Dave, at the end of the day, is a person. I don't know what way he'll go or not. I think he'd probably be like, fucking eat a dick. But, like, but if they're like, hey, you know, here's some pictures of your kid. Here's 5 million. Like, it's a different story. I'll fucking take the 5 million at that point. You know, like, I know I would. So, like.
Well, you raise a good point. It's antithetical to build up this gigantic, like, or what would need to be gigantic machinery, right? To basically go to war with these two establishment parties that are essentially, you know, it's completely analogous to the Middle East, right? Like in Afghanistan, right? Like they didn't say, oh, we have to have as many military and as much, you know, as technologically advanced weaponry and stuff like that. They basically like dipped and dodged, and they were like, look, we're just going to go where you aren't. And, you know, we're going to pick at you and essentially just like incessantly run you ragged. And so to your point, I actually think that is a philosophical, it's problematic philosophically, right? Like, what are we going to do? Create this gigantic machinery in order to like win one big race or something like that? And then what happens afterward, right? Does some despot come in and take it over and then use it, you know, to their will, which will not be what you and I and everyone else who kind of thinks like us, you know, really wants it to actually end up doing, right? And so that is kind of interesting. It's like not a paradox, but it's just like something that is, it doesn't necessarily seem congruent, so to speak. I would love him to stand up and just be like, look, I don't want to win.
Yeah,
like,
which I think he will, honestly. But here's the thing, though. Like, I'm just thinking this. If I'm going to make any predictions, I think if Dave Smith gets a nomination, he will probably have the highest percentage of any fucking Libertarian Party person ever. I think he will. But then, what's the next logical conclusion? What happens after that? Like, I don't even know what an accurate percentage for something to be really high for a Libertarian Party. Because, shit, like 2% is fucking high for us. But, like, I don't know. You probably pay attention to politics more than I can. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. If we get, like, a high percentage, what is going to happen the next go around?
Well,
they're going to fall
what's
back
going to happen?
into
A ton of money is going to come into the system, and that's when, like, I agree with you. You're really going to run the risk of corruption internally within that party.
Which this is an ironic thing, because I remember the debate between Dave and Sarwark forever ago. Like, they kind of had this like debate of like whether it should be the messaging should be pure and to like essentially drive people, or if the messaging should be essentially milquetoast to appeal to a broader audience to get more votes. But I actually think, and this is a thing I've said plenty of times, I think principled and pragmatic are actually kind of the same thing. And pragmatic is just this like bullshit misnomer that people use and are just playing semantic games. And they think they're being pragmatic when they're not. So I actually think that like a fierce message of what Dave is going to have was actually will drive more votes. But the problem is, what is the takeaway people get from that? Look what we can do. We should get more votes, blah, 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 blah. And then we just end up falling right back into the same fucking thing. You know what I mean? You see how that like process works? I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, it's just how I've thought. I just feel like,
I would say I agree with you in terms of if the push is going to be get someone elected or get someone as high a percentage of the vote as the president, I agree with you. I think that is building a system that is just begging to be co-opted or corrupted, right? I would say what more appeals to me would be someone who stood out in front of the party and said, look, our job isn't to get a president elected. It's not to get a senator elected. It's not even to get a governor elected. It's to get as many council people elected as possible so that they can basically make their towns sanctuaries for all of this stuff that you and I hold dear, and then tell the feds and the state to fuck off, right? Like, I think that would be a much better message. And I think it would be, I mean, it would still end up being a larger organization, but then at least it's not centralized, right? Like, then it's decentralized. You're basically, depending on more local subunits as opposed to some overarching giant party that just kind of sucks all of the money and power to itself, Yeah,
I mean, I'll give you, that's probably preferable. I mean, so like, I don't think it's, I mean, it's, I don't know, I mean, it's just like a constitutional republic is preferable to democracy. But I mean, so yeah, I guess it's preferable to go that route. I mean, but I think it's almost kind of inevitable we will eventually kind of break apart like that. But yeah.
Let me ask you this question. What would your ideal amount of government be? Absolutely zero? Or would you be okay with some level of local voluntary government?
I would prefer zero, but I mean, okay, well, never mind. I didn't listen to the last part. Voluntary government. But the thing, I guess I would want a voluntary government. I guess it depends on what that means, because a voluntary government is kind of an oxymoron in terms, in a sense. So, sure, if you have an oxymoron, or not oxymoron, but a fucking voluntary government, sure. I mean, then I'll just, if I don't like it anymore, I'll opt out. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I guess, because by that point, it's not really a government. But sure, I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of like a, I don't know, like, like a married bachelor. I don't know.
It's very much, it's like a word salad that I use to try and explain my position to normies, right? Because you and I know that if there was voluntary government on the local level, none of us would participate. Like, that's the idea. But for me to explain it to normies, I have to be like, well, look, I want local government, but I want it to be voluntary. So I get to say whether I opt in or opt out. With them, I don't think many of them are going to make that logical step to be like, oh, well, no one's going to opt in, so obviously you're for no government, which is, I don't know, maybe it's disingenuous or something like that, but that's really like my preferred way of explaining it, because some people are just so like attached to this, like, I need some amount of government. Like, I need some central kind of, like, organization or structure to, like, protect me from everyone else, which is a load of bullshit. But, they put that mental kind of, that mental kind of block on themselves to think that they actually need that shit,
Yeah. I thought you were getting at if I would prefer if I wanted zero government or some sort of like broken up government. I thought you were getting at the whole thing of like I think it's Rothbard mentioned some shit about like how like we need to have like the abolitionist mindset and that like we want it all gone. At the same time, like by doing that ends up inevitably kind of we probably won't get that, or maybe eventually we will, but we will get something closer to that. But we never, because I feel like when you settle, you end up just getting bullshit,
Yeah.
But
well, I think you like the agorist approach is also kind of that, with the exception of the fact that the agorist is legitimately endeavoring to remove themselves from politics, right? And so what eventually happens is that person is essentially ungovernable, right? And so the system, however it reacts, will, either cease from bothering that person, or if the system does try and like, overpower them or whatever, it is successful in showing everyone else like, look, you can't leave. Like, you're stuck. This is a fucking prison. You can't leave, right? So both of them are effective. And it's just a matter of, whether the powers that be want to put that message out there or whether or not they just want to kind of like, wipe their hands and be like, oh, this damaged person doesn't want to be a part of civilized society, which obviously is not true. But
I want to touch on something while I'm thinking of it. You kind of were hitting on like, I feel like a lot of people with like agorism and shit, they'll be like, well, like they act like we're just ignoring that shit doesn't exist. Yeah. And it's like, I get it. But here's the thing though. I actually think being like someone who breaks away from the system, I actually think that has political effects. So like by me not being involved in the system, I think that inevitably actually causes things like, for example, me not being involved in the system, I think probably inevitably causes shit like maybe increases the likelihood of like a balkanization or shit like that. Because I think the powers that be realizing they don't have a buy-in causes inevitable effects to happen. So, yeah. I mean, we probably can quibble about what those are, but like if they only have 10% of people who buy into that myth that they have some sort of illusory authority, then it's like, what can you really do with that 10%? Like, like you're treading on thin water here, like, or thin ice. So
no, that's 100%. Like, I'm in agreement with that. I think that the more we can do, and I say there is no we, I'm channeling Spooner, but there is no we, but the more I can do to remove myself from the system, the less social proof it gives to the people around me that they have to buy into the system, right? And so that really comes down to that culture piece of it, right? Like if they see someone who has detached themselves as much as possible and they haven't died from malnutrition and, they can still run a successful business and provide for their family and stuff like that, a lot of people start going, maybe I don't need to be a part of this system either, Meanwhile, it also takes tax money and all kinds of other authority away from the centralized governmental power. So, no, I'm on board with 100% of that.
Side note, this is that point I was driving at is exactly why I think so far Biden's my favorite president. Yeah. You look at him and how the fuck do you have any illusion of authority? It's so easy, like left, right. Like there are people who like, even like some of the most like brainwashed people, like generally speaking, you can actually talk to them one-on-one. And if anything, they'll just dance around it or try to avoid the question because you're like, look at that motherfucker. Look at him. That's all. You don't even have to say that much. Like, listen to him talk. Look at him. It's like, and the same kind of goes for Trump. But if anything, it's worse here because at least this guy's just like a senile, like, I don't know. It's just like, and like I know a lot of people are freaking out. He's doing all these crazy authoritarian shit. But I do think that is dangerous for the places that the state has a large foothold on. But I don't think, like I said, going forward, I think in like the rural areas, we're starting to see stuff where I think, what's the word I'm looking like nullification and stuff will kind of play into effect in the future. And I think that like the conservatives don't really have any love for Biden. So if he pushes through some crazy gun control, I think there's going to see a lot of places that are like, fuck you.
He's done more to make people rebel than I'll use air quotes, than conservatives have done in the last 40 or 50 years, right? If anything, the only thing that conservatives have conserved is people being so pissed off that they opt out or act out against the system, right? But with Biden being in power, I have the same mindset. Like, people think I'm crazy, but I'm like, look, Biden is the best thing ever because he is literally the full embodiment of what these people want to do to you, right? In the past, it's all been like, okay, they would take a little bit and they would give a little back in order to, like, shut you up and keep you happy and things like that. And you think that, oh, we beat them back, we won or whatever. Now it's just like they just take and take and take and take. There's no give back anymore at all. And it's because he's not running the show. It's all the people behind him that are running the show, and it is just a complete shit show. And I think you're right. I think there are parts of this country where people are like, no, I've had enough. I'm done. Like, I'm not listening anymore because it's complete bullshit. And I think that's reassuring. I think it is. I wouldn't necessarily have said that maybe like 2-3 months before the election, but after the election, it's been so evident where just no one's happy, like, at all. And they're so pissed and like, they want to rebel is basically what's happening.
Yeah, I have a hard time respecting a president that doesn't have hands. So
they're just apparitions.
Have you heard that conspiracy theory that doesn't have hands?
Well, I mean, you never see them.
Yeah. Well, I think the joke came from that one, like, did you see that one little clip where there was that weird, like, I mean, some people say it was some weird lens thing, but where his hand literally passed through the fucking mic.
Yeah.
So okay, yeah. So that's where the conspiracy theory came from. That he doesn't have hands because it was like CGI'd his hands on.
That's like a perfect example too of just how ridiculous it has all become. Like, it is all literally like pomp and circumstance bullshit to the point where you don't even know what reality is anymore. Right? Like, even when he's standing in the Rose Garden giving a press conference or something like that, most people know that 99% of the words that come out of his mouth are complete bullshit. Like, they're a complete lie, or they're some kind of, like, word salad to get you to think something good is happening when really they're just kind of crapping on you anyway. And so the fact that his hand goes through the mic is just a perfect example of, like, that's not the outlier. That's just that's normal. Like, that's the day.
That crazy. But I mean, I don't know, if I'm going to be not crazy, my theory there is I think the mics were CGI'd in, and I think that was the press doing it to make it seem like a more important scene. Because the whole line of mics there, like in the periphery, I think it makes it seem more important. But like, whereas probably only like 1 or 2 people there in reality, so it looks like there's a whole bunch of people like paparazzi waiting for Biden. But yeah.
No, I'm on board with you. I think that's completely what it is. I think you've like so like when the inauguration happened, I called it a coronation. It wasn't an inauguration. Like, the inauguration used to be pretty simple. Now it's like I mean, you're a comic book guy. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with like Empire Strikes Back and stuff like that. I mean, it is literally a carbon copy of shit that happens that the Empire does to, like, exalt the emperor. Like, that's exactly what it is. And that's, they had the select celebrities, they were all dressed to the nines and everything like that. And that's basically what it is now. It's just a complete show. It has absolutely nothing to do with any substance whatsoever,
Yeah, we're seeing a return to the divine right of kings, and I think you're really seeing how it's kind of a religion too, and that and the thing is, though, that's where I'm kind of getting. I think we're going to see a big bifurcation with the next century, where like we're going to see like people going. It's going to be a big divide, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be like this perfect like north-south shit. I think it's probably going to be like something along the lines of rural and city, and like blue and red to some extent, But like, I think if you're essentially if you're in a blue state in a city and you are in any way dependent on the state, like, you need to fix that, because it's going to get rough in the next like century, and it may not even be so rough for you. But the big thing is, I think it's like one thing I don't remember who I was talking to, but it was kind of like this idea of like how religion works in like if I was born in the Middle East, I'd be Muslim. If I was born in Israel, I'd probably be Jewish. Like, so if you're born there under that rule, you're probably going to be a statist. So it's also about breaking your progeny, your future generations away from that too. So, and I think that's the best path forward for liberty. I think I think that we have this like split essentially, and I don't know if we'll ever necessarily get this like balkanization or this like complete breakaway, but I think it might just be to get to this point where it's like, yeah, we're a state, but kind of just like this iffy, wishy-washy type bullshit,
Yeah.
So
I'm hesitantly optimistic that more rural municipalities will take that route where they chase the interlopers out and they go, look, the state and the federal government have no dominion here. Y'all can go back to your ivory towers and do whatever the hell you want over there, but you're not coming into our town. And I think that is more likely to affect positive change in terms of decentralizing the power structure than, like you said, a state seceding doesn't matter anymore because as red states get, there's still, populous areas that are deep blue. And so you're never going to fully get, like a state that like secedes and like everyone's happy. You're going to get a state that secedes and then, a ton of people are pissed off. And then what's going to happen? Well, they're going to essentially try and take power back, or they're going to cry to DC and be like, you can't do this to us. Don't leave us here. And that's what makes secession not peaceful anymore when, the empire decides that they don't want to allow the slaves to essentially break up what they've put together and constructed with their centrally planned hands,
Yeah. And I think the great thing about what I'm thinking in the future is it's not this simple as like how our Civil War was, where it was two factions, because you're kind of getting at that it's like it's the whole idea of like people say like, oh, if you had an anarchist state, like what if China invaded? It's like, who the fuck are they going to take over? Like, and that's kind of the same idea with like this, where if you have this like loosey-goosey like this like kind of rural city divide where it's like the rural, like, yeah, maybe they're kind of miniature-ish, maybe there's a fucking sheriff in some areas, whatever. But it's almost like they have less of this like importance of the state or this like, pomp and circumstance or whatever. And it's like, what are you going to do? Like, I mean, who are you going to fucking, kill or overthrow to be like, well, you're back in the cult. Like, who? Like, it's just, that's the beauty of decentralization. There's no one. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you're just going to like wear yourself out. It's like, it's the same idar of like, how the fuck do you take over Afghanistan? Good luck.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is. Rothbard talks about it in Anatomy of the State, right? Like, they have to convince you that you're the one at risk. You're not at risk. It's the people that are in power that are at risk, right? And they try and make you think that you're fighting right along with them, but you really aren't. Like, you're fighting for their interests to stay in control, and they try and make you think that some other master is coming along who's much worse and more dangerous than they are, and they're all benevolent and everything like that. I mean, it's really ironic, some of these things that people hold on to. In fact, you were on a show recently. You were on Live from the Gulag or whatever recently, and you were kind of talking about that last little bit, right, that people hold on to between monarchist and anarchist, and that idea of kind of like the necessary evil part of it. What do you think that is? Is it just like a defense mechanism? Is it fear of being truly free? Like, what do you think it is?
I do. I just think it's one of those things. It's like, it's so ingrained, because that's why I said it was the same thing to me for probably a good like year or two. Like, when I basically around the time I started listening to Dave and all through, like, Dave made so many arguments like in different ways, and like it took me sitting down and reading Anatomy of State and like having a full cohesive like breakdown of like why it's not necessary, essentially. Because like the way Rothbard comes at that, from what I recall, is kind of like his whole concept there is like it's going to go to shit no matter what. The myth that we're going to have this like perfect setup that's going to keep it all together. Like, no, it's going to go to shit. It was destined to go to shit no matter what. Yeah. So like, I mean, that. And even then, like from years listening to Dave, it's just one of those things where like, I always had some other thing where like, it's just a cognitive dissonance of like, I can always be like, well, this other thing, or what about that? And what the fucking roads, like whatever, and I know it sounds dumb once you're past that divide. So I don't know. It is just one of those things. I think it's just so deeply ingrained in us. It's also like you don't want to feel like you're crazy. But now I'm just very loose. Even with me being in the military, I'm very loosey goosey. I very much advocate on not taking the don't be the CrossFitter that tells everyone he's a CrossFitter. Like don't be that guy. But say if someone asks you and you're like, hey, what do you think? You're like, oh, I don't really think the government should have shit to do with this or whatever. You don't even necessarily have to say anarchist, but like, well, what if they, but don't shy away from it either. Don't like be like dancing around it. Like say if someone directly asked you like, well, what do you think? And you're like, well, I don't think we should have a government at all. Like,
yeah,
there you go. Like, and they're like, are you an anarchist? Like, yeah, that's what I am.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like if you act reasonable like that, people, I mean, yeah, it might raise an eyebrow, but generally they were not going to immediately just assume you're some like burn it down, type, especially if you're not like in their face and being a cunt about it. Like,
yeah,
well, I don't know.
So, and to your point, like, at the very least, like if you are like half-assed about it, if you're like weak in your delivery, if you're apologetic, like don't be apologetic for what you believe or you feel, right? Like, and if you are apologetic to the point where you don't like truly believe enough to be unabashedly that, then you need to read more or study more or like listen to some other people more. But if you are sold, if you are of that mindset where you're ANCAP or at the very least like monarchist or whatever, and you're in that room and someone asks you, don't fucking like say it quietly and meekly and all this. Be like, no, I think that's bullshit. Right? And then when they come back at you, don't try and think that you're going to be their best friend by like backpedaling and kind of like softening the message. If anything, like listening to people like Michael Malice has taught me this. Those people that are so set in their ways, whether it's because of propaganda or they're complicit in it themselves, like, enslaving themselves mentally, you are not going to get them to wake up by trying to be their friend. Right? Like you get them to wake up by telling them in the simplest, most harsh terms why you think they are full of shit. Right? And you know what? They're probably not going to respect you at the end, but like, 1 out of 100 might, where all of a sudden they're like, wow, no one ever said that to me that way, And I think a lot of us had that moment where it was like someone just stood up and went, fuck the state. And we were like, holy shit, did he just say that? Right? Like, and it was something where it was just like, it clicked and you were like, wow, I've felt that all along. We got Rogue popping in. I used to think the state was necessary for military defense, but I realized that isn't the case in the end. Its existence is a threat to defense, which is true. They always go after the military targets first, right? If you're a person and you're like, oh, we live near the Air Force Base or whatever, dude, you're fucked. You're the first place to get bombed, right? Like that's definitely what it is, right? And then Rogue saying Tom Woods sold me on anarchism in the end. He's very stubborn too. And then we got, dude, everyone go to Top Lobster. Are you a Top Lobster guy?
Me? Yeah, no, I like Top Lobster. We've talked before. Trying to get him to work on an intro for me. We'll see.
he is in high demand. I know that much. Josh Smith keeps him extremely busy. They regard your money as their property, and even more nefarious, your children as their property. And I completely agree with that. They think they have dominion over you, your assets, your kids' kids, and that's why I'm on board with you. Like anything you can do to detach or separate yourself from that control mechanism, I think is going to be a positive in the end. You just have to understand that sometimes the system defends itself by, come to try and, you are a big 2A guy, I would imagine?
I mean, not necessarily 2A, but in a sense, yes.
The natural yes. Right of defense.
Yeah, yes, I mean, yeah. I think 2A is fake and gay, but I'm all for the natural right of self-defense. But I'm not as much of a gun guy as I would like to be. I have guns. I mean, I don't have the kind of time to be like the range guy that goes all the time. The funny thing is, like, everyone thinks I'm military, and I'm some like, everybody has this idea of military being a badass. Like, dude, I probably I could. Like I've been in 11 years, and it's probably less than 5 times I've gone to the range in a professional capacity in the military. So maybe even less than 3. I think it might be at like 3. I think so. People have this idea that let that be also a lesson to anyone out there. Whenever you hear someone say like, as a military person, blah 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 blah, especially if they're making an gun fucking argument, tell them to eat a dick, because that doesn't mean a goddamn thing, at all. Like, even if I did go annually or semi-annually, that doesn't make me a weapons expert, and the majority of the military is not combat. Like, I'm a mechanic. So, like, the vast majority of the military is not combat. And even if they were, it's like, cool. What you like shoot, like you shoot what, probably, I don't know what most, what they probably quarterly. Like, so it's like, okay, like most like big gun guys do that way more often. And they will tell you right off the bat that dude who goes to the, to qualify for the military ain't shit. Like,
yeah.
I had Typo on my show not too long ago from Biting the Bullet, and we were talking about this, and he was a Marine, so he actually like legit like shot more. And he was talking about how like it's like, even like, I know for me, even a few times I've gone, it's a joke. Like they're trying to like funnel sheep through a system. Like they want you to get qualified. That way you can say you're good to shoot and you're good to go deploy or whatever. But like they will legit like cheat for you and shit to get you the number you need to pass. And even if you don't pass, like all they're gonna do is have you come back again the next day. So it doesn't mean a damn thing. So I don't know, it's silly. It's all silly. The illusion people have about the military. But I know I kind of went on a tangent there, but I felt like that was kind of what you were implying.
No, I'm
a 2A guy.
And to the point where I've had discussions with like kind of like my local group of friends, and we're all of the same mindset, and it even makes us cringe when we say like 2A, right? Because from our standpoint, like I'm a big proponent of Shane Hazel and his conversations about the Constitution versus the the Articles of Confederation and things like that, and the fact that the Second Amendment shouldn't even need to be said, right? Like, and so to say you're 2A, it's actually more accurate if you just say I'm pro self-defense, right? Like that's what I'm pro, and then you're like, well, what limitation? No limitation, right? Like if I'm being attacked, I literally get to nuke you as long as I don't kill someone else.
Get
right?
me
like,
the fucking McNuke.
Yes, exactly, right? Like that, I think that is more encompassing because we also, anyone who's really strong in, gun rights and personal defense, you run into so many of these people that, again, the same dynamic as other aspects of politics. Like these boomer cons that are basically like, oh, well, sensible gun laws are okay and the NRA is fantastic and all this other stuff. And you're like, no, you don't understand. You are essentially advocating for your own imprisonment, right? Like the cell gets smaller every single day. You're just like, oh, well, it only got smaller by this much today, so we won. No, that's not a win. You still lost, right? Like that is continually the backslide that we've been on. So I always ask that question, and it does make me cringe when I say, are you pro 2A or whatever?
Yeah, but then you get this weird like thing too, and a lot of people push back and be like, well, like, are you glad we have the 2A or whatever? And it's like, well, I don't know, like maybe it's kind of like, I feel like a lot of people like try to play this historical argument of like, look, we have the 2A and look what we have, but it's like, I don't know, like I can't rewind time and remove the 2A and then fast forward time and see how things work out. I have no idea if we'd be in a similar state with or without. I don't fucking know. So like, I mean, there are other countries that have guns like that don't have a 2A. Like, so well, I don't know.
I think the answer to that question is, well, when the first person tried to take another person's gun, did they get shot in the face? If they did, then we would be right where we are, if not better. If they were like, oh, okay, go ahead, take my firearm, then then we'd probably be Australia right now, right? Like or England,
I think a lot of people also forget too what a young country we are. So when they do bring up arguments like that, like, aren't you happy we have the Bill of Rights or the Second Amendment or whatever the fuck? It's like, we're also like a super young country. So I mean, it would be pretty logical to think like, well, maybe that's just because we're like not as far along in our development in that sense. Like maybe we haven't got to the point where we take all the guns. They haven't turned the tyranny inwards yet. They're working on it. So
well, and the constitutional originalists and traditionalists, when I say this, they get really pissed off. And I was like, yeah, we only been around for 250 years. It went to shit really quickly, didn't it? It was like the biggest moonshot, and then the quickest fall from grace ever is pretty much what it's lining up to be right now. All we did was shorten the timeline. That's what we were effective at. We got Rogue talking about, I was learning about the invasion of Norway in World War II today. Norwegian citizens couldn't resist because they didn't have access to munitions, so they fell to Germany really easily. I think the real like answer from history is that ultimately at the end of the day, you can band together with other people to defend yourself. Like, nothing's to say that you're on your own. And I think that's a trope of people that are like, oh, you're an anarchist, you're an agorist, you just want to be alone. And you're like, no, it's actually more on us to form collective markets and things like that, because we have to self-assemble. We have to put these things together, as opposed to, as a collective versus it being centrally planned.
Trying to get a union of egoists for any Sterner people out there, So,
Yeah.
which I like that concept. I don't know if you read Sterner. I was like, the idea is that it's just a union of egoists, and a union is different because I forget what the other thing he says is, like a union or something else, but a union's different because the idea is that you can break away at any point. And if like you're banded on one thing, and if like it's not, you're all individuals, but you're coming together for a certain thing. And if it's not like a collective in the sense that we're a fucking board or whatever, So
Yeah.
yeah.
And no one or small subset of that group holds sway more so than anyone else. I mean, and it's not socialism either, because again, you have that out, right? Like, I think that's the other thing is, like, as an ANCAP, do you get along with ANSOC kind of people, or?
I mean, I don't really, it's not like I necessarily interact with them. I mean, I've always said, I know a lot of people get like super butthurt and like about the whole ANSOC, ANCOMs, but I'm like, my biggest thing is like, as long as you're not like, essentially, as long as you're cool with like the NAP, I don't give a fuck what economic system you think is going to go on. As long, like, yeah. Because the thing is, people like, I know technically there are traditional definitions for ANSOCs and ANCOMs or whatever, but at the end of the day, a lot of people don't really hold true to their specific, like, assigned labels or whatever. So, like, I feel like it's better to interact on an individual level, be like, are you saying if I make a property claim that you will fucking, implement violence to fucking negate that property claim? Yeah. Like, and if they're like, yeah, I'm like, well, fuck you. But if not, then it's like, okay, cool. Then you're just saying that you think magically the state went away. We'd have, like, for some reason, we would all just throw off property rights. Well, I'm not going to, but you can assume that everyone else will. That's cool. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, like, you can give yours up. I'm not going to, if you're going to give me a piece of your stuff, I'll take it. Like,
Yeah, and even then, even with the, like, I mean, this is the whole diagonal unity thing, where it's, like, the whole idea of, like, throwing off it. There is some, I mean, it is kind of like a dangerous game. You're a little bit playing with fire. But at the same time, in some senses, I can kind of get with that and, like, not necessarily working with them, but being about it. Because it's like, sure, I mean, as long as you're like not for hurting people, like not, I guess if you think violence is okay with a proper, like for property right claims, as long as you aren't the majority, cool, fucking try.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, as long as it's not like, it's like, cool, some fucking hippies think they can, without like, I mean, if we're talking about like the Bolsheviks and shit, like, okay, it's a little bit different story. Like, okay, like, not cool. But if it's just these modern day commies we have that like think like, oh, we're gonna, okay, cool, whatever. Like, yeah, as long as we're all for getting rid of the government, like, you can pretend like you can play your little art bullshit, like you're gonna like come to my house with shit you don't know how to use. So
yeah. I think that is a perfect answer. I think that's a good note to end on. Like, that individual answer, right? Is like, look, if you're cool with me being over there and you being over here, and if we want to associate, we can. If we don't want to associate, then we can stay our own, spots, and we don't like send some government agent after each other in order to like exert our will on each other. Cool. You could call yourself whatever the fuck you want. Like, I really don't care, And if you want to give up, like, if you want to voluntarily give up your property to everyone else, have a ball. Like, have fun. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to choose to, but.
I mean, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe when a state goes away, somehow we decide that's most, the best arrangement for everybody, and we end up doing that. I don't fucking know. I don't think so, but like,
no, it's
so. But
look, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
I'm on YouTube, No Way Jose. I'm also on basically any podcatchers. You can find me No Way Jose. I like money, so if you guys want to give me money, you can hit me up at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. I'm also on endthefed.app, which is a kind of like a, I guess you can almost think of it like a crypto Patreon. I mean, the goal for that thing was to be like an app store. It's still very, very fledgling. There hasn't been a ton of people on it. So, the more people get on it, the better. And we'll see where. But yeah, I'm on there. No Way Jose 2020. I think I'm like the first like content creator on there. So like,
awesome.
I don't know. If people want to hop on that, cool. But yeah, so definitely go check that out. I'm like 60 subs out from 300, and I would like to be able to put my shit on Odyssey and not have to manually update. So if you guys could do that, that'd be fucking dope because I'm lazy and I don't want to have more shit that I got to put my stuff on so I can just sync with my YouTube channels.
I got Jeremy Kaufman coming on in a couple of weeks. I'll throw in a good word for you.
Yeah, tell him you know somebody at about 250 that really doesn't want to manually update.
He'll buy you a beer, I swear.
Yeah, like just spot me those 50 subs and let me fucking just sync. Because I'd rather be on there, honestly. It's just I know that's where the people are at is YouTube right now, but there is some. I think there very much is merit to being on other spots because it's like, I mean, I learned this game with social media. I'm more active on Twitter, whereas I was on Facebook back in the day, but now I'm on like everywhere. So and I think there's something to that. So
I'm getting to the point where some of my content will only live on blockchain to try and get some of the eyes there because it's eye-opening the difference in terms of the community, how things work. So yeah, I mean, that's the future. It's not here yet. I mean, like it's not universally adopted or anywhere close to that, but it's getting there. So, I'm going to do my part, anything I can to pull people over there. But yeah, I'll talk to Jeremy for you. We'll figure this out. But look, I am back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Definitely stop in. We're going to be talking some more natural rights, hierarchy of law. I got Josiah back tomorrow night. And look, Jose, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, thanks for having me, and it was fun.
Yep, awesome.